Okay, as usual. Okay, finish. That. So. Okay, so before we start the topic for today, I would like to give you some materials for the final exam. Okay, so for the final exam, your group would be asked to create some kind of suggestion or recommendation, to be exact, for an organization. So this organization trying to digitalize the sales division. Okay, so the sales division consists of more than 2,000 staff. That's including salesperson, manager, supervisor, and administrative staff. So what this company tried to do was to replace the semi-manual system into fully automatic system. So for example, in the old system or the current system, the salesperson was equipped with a catalog, printed catalog, and also a hard copy of purchase order form. Okay, so the salesperson need to bring out the catalog because they have different program every week, and even sometimes during very high season, they can have new program emerge in the middle of the week. What the program? The program is a sales program. It basically giving some kind of information to the customer on what's the promotion or the sales program that currently run. Like if you buy product A, 5 unit, you will get product B as a bonus, 1 unit. Or if you buy product A at least 100 unit, then you will get this additional discount of 3%. So that's the program. They have more than 100 different products, and each product will be bundled into different marketing or sales program. So it is important for the salesperson to bring out this catalog because it changes quite frequently, at least weekly. And the next, then they try to digitalize the catalog. So anytime the catalog changed, the salesperson didn't need to print that new catalog out. Okay. And they also trying to use electronic form or digital form for entering customer order rather than using paper form. Okay. So that's one thing. Okay. they want to change that. So basically, the sales division, they will need various components of new information system. They need new type of hardware, perhaps, for salesperson. They probably need new sales software, and maybe other softwares that will be required. So your job as a group is to create some kind of recommendation based on the requirements of the group, of the sales division, and then came up with your suggestion. What kind of software, what kind of hardware, how much will it cost the companies, so on and so forth. So one of the requirements for the final exam is to have real information. It means if you suggest buying a laptop, for example, you need to specify the brand and the model of the laptop, and also how much will it cost. Okay. I'll give you more detail next week when I finalize my final exam program. But just to give you some kind of information on and help you prepare for the final exam, if it is. Any question? Yes. I'll give you the company. I'll give you the case. I'll give you all the information you needed. What you need to do is to come up with recommendation. Part of the recommendation will be based on today's topics. Okay. Stefania or Christian Ellen, do you have any questions at home?
No, sir.
Any more question? Okay, so now let's talk worst case scenario. Okay. We will use kuliah site for exam submission, just like midterm exam. Unfortunately, kuliah site is not as reliable as I like to be, and it's beyond my control. And it has been known that kuliah site could be unavailable during critical times. So in normal time, I'll be at home or in the office and monitoring the situation. So if something's wrong, I can make decision quickly. As you know, suppose the kuliah site was down, I can immediately give you extension and give you another alternative for submitting your exam. Unfortunately, during the final exam time, I will be out of town and probably will not have decent internet connection. So if something happen with kuliah site that prevent you submitting your exam on time, okay, don't worry too much. You should try, okay? But if you fail and it's not your fault, I mean, like if kuliah site unavailable during the time that you're supposed to submit your assignment, I will deal with that after I return. So don't send me email every hour, for example, to say what to do, things like that. I'll deal with that. Okay, so but you need to try. Okay, and if it's not your fault, if it's the kuliah site fault, then don't worry. Okay. Another problem, and I don't think there's a problem in this class. Let me check. Yeah, I don't think that would be a problem. It's concerning the attendance. Okay. The requirement for sitting in final exam is to have at least 75% of attendance. So if your attendance during the semester is less than 75%, you are not allowed to sit in final exam. Like I said, it's not a problem for this class. So basically, it's not applied to you. But in other classes, my policy about that is you're still able to submit the exam because this is a group effort, right? But I could not give that students their final exam grade because it will be empty. So the faculty will strike that out from the record, and I don't have any place to put it. Okay. So, like I said, it's not a problem in this class. So you're safe. Okay. But just in case it happens with your friend or your colleague or whoever outside this class, that's the reason. And that's beyond my control. Because that decision was made by the government, and if it's up to me, you can absent from my class the whole semester and still can pass. Okay, as long as you can submit your assignment on time, you sit in the exam, and have a good mark. That's the most important thing. If you still can pass without attending any lecture for my courses, that's on me, not on the students. It means that I could not create a good enough environment for students to attend. So that's on me, not on the student. But attendance requirements is derived from government decision, so nothing we can do about it. Okay, no question, I guess. So let's start with our topic today. This is the strategy for developing accounting information system. Yeah, Alan and Stefania, can you see it from home?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
No problem, right? Okay. So this is a classic problem. If you already enrolled in course accounting, this will be classic problem of selecting between take on their own or buy from outside. The same principle applies to information system. You can develop the system or buy whatever exists in the market. Okay. So that's the basic decision for how to obtain information system, make or buy. But obviously, there are a lot of variation within each option. Let's start with the purchase or buy. Okay. Even if you buy something on the market, you still need to follow what we did last week, what we covered last week, which is analysis of the system. You still need to define what's your organization needed for the new system. What kind of system you need? For example, when this faculty decided to make iPad and also ebook as part of any new students enrolled in this faculty, obviously there was a discussion and also some sort of study determining that iPad is the most appropriate. Although I disagree with that, but that's the decision. Okay, so we still need to find out what kind of system we want to buy. Okay, and then we drafted the document called request for proposal. This is the document to define the features or function of the software that we want to buy. So the software or the system should be able to do A, B, C, D, E, and so on and so forth. Okay. Government of Indonesia, for example, one of the requirements that always appears in any request for proposal for government software is it should be built based on open source technology. The government of Indonesia doesn't like system that being built using proprietary technology. Why? I tell you what open source later, but the government in Indonesia would like to be able to modify the system later and not depend on any vendors or suppliers. So create a request for a proposal and then circulate or announce the request for a proposal to potential suppliers. Okay. And then the potential suppliers will submitting their bid. Some vendors that deem necessary, they might be invited to give demonstration, especially the shortlisted, perhaps. And all the vendors that submitted their bid and passing the quality requirements might be invited to give demonstration. Now, how to evaluate proposals? Any proposals have two elements for system or technical. Technical spec. This is the software itself and cost. Okay, so this is where it gets different. Technical is also called the quality. All the proposals that being submitted by vendors need to be evaluated based on technical and quality side and also cost. The government of Indonesia usually think this criteria, if I'm not mistaken, if they haven't changed the method. First, all the submission should be fulfilling the technical terms or the requirements. So it has to, for example, for any software, it has to be able to perform the listed function or function that required by industry. And then all the shortlisted potential vendors then will be evaluated based on cost. The Indonesian government will use the lowest bidder from all the shortlisted from technical. Then the government will pick the lowest cost or the cheapest submission. Okay. But if you could not qualify based on technical or quality criteria, you won't be able to reach the cost evaluation. Now, there are other, and I think that's better criteria. This is a method that used by the World Bank. It's called UCBS. Quality cost-based selection. It means both quality and cost should be considered. Okay. And usually the quality will be given bigger proportion for the quality. 70 or 60%, while cost only 30 to 40%. So for example, if you got 100 for technical quality and the proportion is 70, so for technical you'll get 70. But for cost, if you only get 50 and it's 30, what is it? What? 50. Yeah, 50. So the total score would be 85. If others score below 85, then you will win. With this criteria, the bidder with the best quality and also the most expensive cost could win. And that's, in my opinion, that makes sense. Why? A good quality product ever cheap. It's always expensive. So it's better to have, we pay a bit more now rather than we suffer from losing something in the future. Okay. But then again, different organizations will have different selection criteria. Okay. So, for example, just before the pandemic, Pentagon announced that they need cloud-based system for their new IT environment for defense, and the contract was valued at 10 billion US dollar. Okay, so a lot of companies bid for that tender. The shortlisted company at the end was the biggest cloud provider in the world, Amazon and Microsoft. Okay. At the time, during the bidding process and evaluation process, the American President Trump at that time giving some kind of political statement that more favorable to Microsoft. Why? Because he hated Amazon owner Jeff Bezos. And why he hated Jeff Bezos? Not because Amazon. That's quite silly. Trump hated Bezos because Jeff Bezos is the owner of a newspaper called Washington Post. And Washington Post is known to be a harsh critic of Trump. Okay. And the funny thing is, Jeff Bezos owning Washington Post on his own, it's not related to Amazon whatsoever. But since it's owned also by Jeff Bezos, and Trump hated Jeff Bezos, so he asked, in his speech that Pentagon selected Microsoft, and that happened. Pentagon actually selected Microsoft as the winner, but then Amazon challenged that decision, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, the last information I get that contract tender was cancelled and it's back to square one. So they have to redo the process. So that's purchasing. Now, with purchasing, you need to be careful with the license. Okay. Software has a license. How many of you, when installing a software in your computers, actually reading the end user's license agreement before you tap or click accept, okay, yes, continue, next, whatever? No? Okay, good. That's actually a very bad practice. Many years ago, I had a colleague that He was a programmer for a big company, and he bought this specific software that will help him to create new software. Apparently, that software in the license stating that whatever product made by that software, the company will have the copyright, the new product. So you need to be careful with that. Okay. License. I'll talk to you about the license a little bit more. So with the license is not proof or legal document for ownership. License is a proof or legal document stating that you have the right to use the software. It may or may not transferable, so you cannot just give that software to somebody else. It may or may not allow you to commercialize any service, like, for example, if you have Windows and you have a computer rental business, you may need to buy specific license that allow Windows to be rented. It's different from if you buy, laptop or computers, and then you had Microsoft Windows, the genuine Microsoft Windows as part of the computers. That version of Windows are not allowed to be rented. It's only be used by the owner, so for personal use. What else? It's not transferable, and license, it could be a perpetual license that you paid once and forever you can use that version of software. If you want a new version, you have to buy another license, for example. But for that particular version, you can use it and you can have it as long as you like, now and forever. But there's also license that will require you to pay annual license fee. Most antivirus using this scheme. So there are free version and also paid version that you have to pay every year. And based on my experience, free version and paid version are actually quite different. I was having, when I was the head of computer labs back in 2007, we have this problem with a virus, computer virus. We use a free version of AVG at the time. Okay. The software is able to, sorry, this is, it should, it
Aku tak bisa. Orange. Waktunya kemarin terus siapa? Cuma bukan nama aja, belum. Kamu bukan nama pakai file. Tapi proses itu. Awalnya mau jalan masih kok.
That was a annual license. Okay. So when I was head of computer labs, we use free version, and it could detect that particular virus, but it could not remove that virus. So it stayed on the system. And that's before the cloud era, like what you have today. There was no Google Drive, there was no OneDrive. So a student at that time have a storage facility in the faculty system, which is just next door. So it's instead of the student having to go around using flash drive, they can just store their files and data on the system next door. But it's accessible from computer labs downstairs. So virus is a bad news, especially we could not remove it. I tried to send the sample of that virus to AVG, but there was no response whatsoever. For a week, we tried to update the antivirus and try to remove that, failed. So I decided at the time to ask for money to Pak Koto, the vice dean at the time, and it was for about $700 for 2 years. So all the computers in this faculty can be protected with just $700 for 2 years. After I got the money, I purchased the license, I activated the antivirus, still the same. It could detect the virus, but it could not remove it. However, the difference this time, when I resent the virus again using a paid license and having my name as the customer, paid customer, AVG immediately respond within 24 hours. They respond, said, then please update your antivirus with this. So they send us specific file to update our, and with this new update, the virus finally can be removed. So that's the difference. With paid license, you usually can have a better support. Yeah. Now, another type of license I already mentioned is the open source license. So, a lot of companies in the old days, in the 70s, 80s, a lot of software companies make their fortune by exploiting license. And one particular software programmer, Richard Stallman, see this practice and he felt that that was not right. Okay. User should not be exploited for money using just a software. And do you realize that software is a digital product, right? With digital product, the cost of production is only for the first unit. So all the fixed production cost and all the variable production cost is just for the first unit. For the second unit and the billion or million units later, what you need is just the cost for creating a copy of that unit. So it's different from, for example, this bottled water. You still need to have fixed cost and variable cost for each unit of this photo. But with software, you only need one, the first unit. Then you just copy it. And the cost of making copy of a software is very low. It's practically zero. You just click, write, copy, move somewhere else, click, paste. That's it. You may need to pay for storage media like USB flash drive or DVD or CD. But if you provide the software over the internet, it's practically free to distribute the software. So that's the cost structure of a software. Okay. So Richard Stallman said that for something that only costs you to make for the first unit, and then you exploiting customer for the subsequent unit, is not fair. So he started a movement. It's called the open source movement. The software, according to his belief, should be free. And not only free, but also provided with the source code. So the actual code typed by the programmers should be provided. Okay. And people are free to make any modification they like. The only catch is whenever somebody make modification of open source software, the modification automatically become open source also, and it should be published. Okay. The good example for that is a software, if you may heard this, operating system called Linux. Okay. It's made by or created by a Finnish student called Linus Torvald at the time. He was a computer science student. So if you enroll in computer science degree, one of the subject would be operating system. And one of the assignment is usually creating an operating system. And Linus for that subject, creating Linux. But it then is quite popular, and Linus decided to make it open source. And now it's anywhere. Android is the mobile version of Linux. So it's a Linux that has been modified to run on mobile devices. That's why Android is actually open source. That's why you can find Android in unusual places. Smartphone, obviously, tablet, but also watch, smart TV, smart refrigerator, the dashboard of your car. Okay. Tesla using Android version of Android for their cars. But that's why. Okay. So yeah, many people then creating open source software. But now, if a programmer or a company give that software for free, where or how they could get money from? So Stallman proposed that software company or programmers in general could make money by offering paid support. You want training to use that software? We can provide training for a fee. You want to modify the software but didn't know how? Somebody can make that modification for you. If you look at Kuliah site, it's actually modified version of an open source software. It's called Moodle. But then KSI modified Moodle to suit our requirements. Okay, so that's license. There are paid license with perpetual or annual license, and also open source. Now, if you have sufficient resources, you can develop the software in-house using the IT staff within your company. It provides significant competitive advantage, and also it's easy for the developer team to create the software that suitable for that organization. Why? Because they are insider. They have insider information. They know how the process works. They know who doing what and how they do their work. Unfortunately, it's quite expensive. Why? Because all the resources to build that software only being used for develop single software or system and no revenue from it. Okay. Different from Microsoft, for example, they can sell millions and millions copies of Windows or Office and get money from it. But if, for example, KSI develop Siatma for you, they only get money for developing that software, but they cannot sell Siatma to somebody else. It's not revenue generating product. Okay. And of course, KSI developers are no match to Microsoft or Google developers. Once I saw an interview with people who work at Google, they were asked, what do you think of working for Google? And that person that being interviewed, he was graduated from one of the top, I think he was graduated from MIT, and he said to the interviewer that all the people who wrote textbook that he studied, they were in Google. So all the people, and including one of them is called Vincent Cerf. Vincent Cerf is one of the pioneer of internet, one of the people that actually creating internet, Vincent Cerf. And he's now working for Google. So no match for technical quality and capability. Okay, and basically, if you graduated from college with undergraduate degree and you enter Atma Jaya as an employee of like administrative staff, like you can only get decent salary, but it's nothing compared to if you work for IT company. 8 years ago, when I worked as project manager, 2 of my programmers hijacked by Gemlock. I paid them like twice the minimum wage. So it's almost 2.5 million. Gemlock offered them 4 million plus any other benefits like pension plan, health insurance on top of BPJS. So I can't compete with that. Okay. What I was trying to say is hiring a high quality programmer for KSA is a tall order. It's very difficult. Why? Because people with good technical quality will not work for Atma Jaya with that salary. Okay. So that's the difficulties of developing software in-house. End user computing means if the system needed is so small, it's just for personal use, you can allow that person to develop their own application. I did that for my courses several times. Okay. I didn't depend on the facilities provided by the university, so I created my own system. But that's just for my class. Very specific requirement, and it's just like for maximum 5 students and mostly less than 5 students. So it's very small system, and it does nothing critical. It's just for my class. If that's the case, end user computing is the right choice. Okay, now I'll talk about outsourcing in a minute. So from financial perspective, the best option is usually buying the software. unless your system need is very specific and also dealing with confidential data. If that's the case, then you need to build the system yourself. What if you need to build the system, but you don't have the resources? You can always ask somebody else to build the system. There are a lot of software house or programmers or developers that can be hired to develop system for a company. And then after it finishes, that's it. Okay. Say goodbye and see you next year or whatever. Okay. So outsourcing. Outsourcing means contracting a function of a company to the third party. If you look at the cleaning service and also security guards in this campus, we actually, Atma Jaya actually outsource that function to third party. So the cleaning service that you've met every day, the security guards in front, they are not employee of this university. They are employee of a company, and that company being paid by Atma Jaya to provide those services to us. Okay, so that's basically outsourcing. And IT outsourcing has been a trend since the 1970s. So it has been more than 50 years. It was started with Kodak. You know Kodak? So Kodak used to be the biggest photography-related company. They created, in the old days in Indonesia, especially, Kodak is identical with camera. So we call camera, well, that's actually called camera Kodak. It's similar to when you say search the internet today with just Google it, for example. Not searching, but Google. Okay. Anyway, in the 1970s, Kodak felt that they are photography-related company, not IT company. So there is no point of having IT department that costing them millions and millions of dollars every year. So they decided to sell the whole IT department to IBM. IBM is one of the giant in IT industry. It used to be the giant. You can still find their traces nowadays. Anybody use Lenovo product? No? Okay. So if you look at Lenovo portfolio, their laptop and also their desktop computer, it calls ThinkPad and also ThinkStation. The word think actually, the brand ThinkPad and ThinkStation is actually came from IBM. So few years ago, IBM decided to sell their PC division, personal computer division, to Lenovo. Even the term PC, personal computer, was started by IBM. When I was learning computers in the early 90s, there are only two types of computers in the world. First, IBM personal computer, or IBM personal, or the clone of IBM personal computer. So there is genuine IBM and also the clone. We call it at that time the non-IBM computer as jangkrik. So, well, because it's cheap and cheerful, but IBM, you can see at that time IBM was just like today's Macintosh. It's so powerful, it was so expensive and exclusive. Okay. Okay. So let's get back to Kodak. So Kodak decided to sell every all of their IT department, to the IT staff, and also all the computers in Kodak. Okay, and then Kodak hire IBM to provide computation function to Kodak. So if Kodak need laptop, They just told IBM, we need laptop with this specification. IBM will provide the laptop and Kodak pay. We need a payroll system. IBM will give Kodak payroll system and Kodak just pay for that. Okay. Now, after that, after the Kodak's and IBM agreement, outsourcing become a trend. A lot of companies try to have outsourcing. Now, this is economic 101. Steady supply, but increasing demand. What will happen? Price increase. Price hike. US companies selected outsourcing because it was cheap. But since the price of outsourcing became more expensive, it was no longer cheap. In some cases, even more expensive than insourcing. Okay. So, what did they do? And this is the beauty or the attraction of outsourcing. They try to find lower cost alternative. Outsourcing is always driven by cost. Finding cheaper alternative. Okay. So when outsourcing become expensive in the US, they try to find somewhere else for outsourcing. And US companies found India. In the height of outsourcing, 2007, 70% of the world outsourcing market held by Indian companies. Okay. And if you look at STEM field for all over the world, science, technology, you find a lot of Indian people. So Indian are well known as the capacities and also the best English, although they accented from the so a lot of US companies, European companies, foreign companies shifting their IT work to India. And it's at that time it was a lot cheaper because cost of labor in India was much cheaper. The government actually supporting outsourcing effort, and Indian companies at that time have better quality than US companies. For example, in IT world, there is a quality measure to measure IT quality of a company. It calls MI, capability, maturity, model, integrity. It was developed by Software Engineering Institute. So basically, IT company will fall into 5 different levels. OSIS level 1, ISIS level 1. The first company that ever achieved level 1 was Infosys. At that time, Infosys reached quality level 5. Microsoft was at level 3. So you can imagine the difference in quality at that time. Okay, so a lot of companies shifting their IT function to India. Okay, and that's create another problem. Okay, remember that lower cost is the main driver for outsourcing, and when it's become not low anymore, it's become more expensive, they will shifting to something else. So with outsourcing to out of the country, or is known as offshore outsourcing, then come different problems that was not apparent at the beginning. Okay. First, outsourcing, the key of successful outsourcing is a good contract between the customer and the IT supplier. With a good contract, the outsourcing can be beneficial. But enforcing contract, especially with a company that weighs along the way, India and America and US are quite far away, is not easy. It's difficult. So apparently, it's not that cheap anymore. At first, the US company is sending their staff to India to improve the contract enforcement. But not many people want to travel to India and stay in India. And also it's quite expensive to send their staff to India. So what happened was Indian company opening office in the US and sending a lot of Indian developer to US. Again, apparently that's not cheap. That's quite expensive. So that's the problem. Now, another problem, and this is quite significant. When I was studying, and this not only happened in Australia, this happened in all the Western countries. That's because of almost all IT jobs were outsourced to India. There were none or just a small amount of IT workers available in this country. The immediate effect was IT schools become unpopular for local students. When I was studying in Australia, my classmates mostly consist of international students. Indonesian, Taiwan, Singapore, Malaysia, Nepal, China, Macau, and only 2% from Australia. And they were in that class because their office made them do. And those two, and then when I teach in Australia also, most of my students were not Australian, only 2 Australian students. And they were not working for any IT company. They were working for the Australian Air Force. So there, after I graduated, my faculty, when I was in Australia, the faculty calls the Faculty of IT, Faculty of Information Technology, because of lack students, they having difficulties obtaining new students. After I graduated, that faculty were merged to another faculty. So it was merged to Faculty of Engineering. So you probably can imagine that industrial technology faculty being merged to engineering faculty. Why? Because they could not get enough students, especially local students. Why bother? No IT works available, so it's no use to learn about IT. And at that time, I remember Atma Jaya, at that time having grant from the German government to send few of our lecturers to German for study. The 2 faculty that using that grant was the social science faculty and also industrial engineering. When the lecturers from industrial engineering were asked, what do you want to learn in German? They said, IT. The representative of German government a bit shocked because he said that nobody learn IT in German anymore. If you want to learn IT, we go to India at the time. So now that goes on for a few years until the companies in the Western countries realized that outsourcing is not as cheap as it was estimated. It's as expensive as insourcing, and in most of cases, it's lower quality. So a lot of those companies trying to bring back the IT jobs from India to US or Western Europe. The problem, if you remember, there were not many IT experts because a lot of local students did not also bring IT. So therefore, we also train. They are having IT expertise crisis. That's why, if you look at now, a lot of courses offering programming course to elementary school, that trend was actually started in the US. Why? Because they were having difficulties finding IT expert. And if you look at the current CEO of Google and Microsoft, Sundar Pichai, for example, he was not born in the US. He was born in India and then imported to US by Google and then become Google CEO. So that's the problem. Now, outsourcing may be beneficial because it's shifting non-core business function to third parties, external parties. But we need to be very careful with the function that we outsource. If you just need smartphone, well, buying or outsourcing smartphone provisioning is excellent choice. But if you need an application, you probably need to have some sort of in-house development combined with outsourcing to have that. That's why if you look at our IT service in this university is a mix between in-house development, open source, and outsourcing. For services like email and also Microsoft Teams, for example, we use outsourcing. But for SIATMA, your attendance, for example, we built that in-house. And for kuliah site, KSI decided to use open source. So that's the. Any question? Any question at home, Stefania or Ellen?
No, sir.
Okay, so I guess that's it for today. Next week will be our last lecture for this subject. We'll give you more detail about the final exam, okay? And we'll cover the last topic. Okay, so stay and see you next week. No worries.